They moved in to take care of her. They managed her meals, locked the doors, and replaced her vitamins with mysterious blue pills that made the world go dark. Victoria Sterling, a retired judge known for her iron will, suddenly became a prisoner in her own mansion. Her son calls it dementia. Her daughter-in-law calls it protection. But Victoria knows the truth. It is a robbery in slow motion. With her mind fading and phone lines cut, how can a 70-year-old woman fight back against the people she loves most? The answer lies in a hidden silver pen, a loyal dog, and one final, brilliant verdict that no one saw coming. If you are listening from anywhere in the world, please leave a comment and subscribe, because there are truths that need to be shared, even if they shake your beliefs. There are stories, no matter how painful, that must be told. The Sterling Manor was too big for one person. That was what everyone told Victoria. It was a Victorian masterpiece perched on the hills of Connecticut, built in the 1922 with stone and ambition. It had high ceilings that trapped the silence and magnified it. Since her husband, Edward, had passed away 5 years ago, that silence had become Victoria's constant companion. She didn't mind it. Silence didn't ask for money. Silence didn't lie. Victoria stood by the bay window in the library, watching the autumn rain lash against the glass. Her right hand trembled slightly against the velvet curtain, a nuisance, nothing more. Essential tremor, the specialist had called it. Benign, but annoying. It made writing a thank you note difficult and pouring tea a hazard. But it didn't touch her mind. Her mind was as sharp as the diamond ring she still wore on her left hand. Headlights cut through the gloom of the long, winding driveway. A beat-up sedan, its muffler sputtering, pulled up to the front portico. Victoria sighed, her breath fogging the glass. They were here. She hadn't wanted this. When Mark had called last week, sobbing, saying they were being evicted from their apartment in New Haven, saying his crypto trading business had failed again, her first instinct had been to write a check. That's what she always did. She was the safety net, the bank of Mom. But then Jessica had gotten on the phone. "It's not just money, Mom," Jessica had said, her voice dripping with that cloying sweetness that made Victoria's teeth ache. "We're worried about you, truly, being all alone in that big, old house. Mark cries himself to sleep thinking about you, falling down those stairs with nobody to help. Let us come stay, just for a few months. We'll cook, we'll clean, we'll help you manage things, and we can get back on our feet. We can be a family again, a family." The word was a hook, barbed and sharp, and Victoria had bitten. She was lonely. God, she was lonely. The doorbell rang, echoing through the empty foyer. Victoria smoothed her cashmere cardigan, took a deep breath to steady her hand, and walked to the heavy oak door. She opened it to find Mark standing there, soaking wet, holding 2 battered suitcases. Jessica stood behind him, shielding herself with a large umbrella, holding a small potted orchid. "Hi, Mom," Mark said. He looked tired. He aged 10 years every time she saw him. His eyes darted around, avoiding hers. "Come in. You'll catch your death," Victoria said, stepping aside. Jessica breezed past her, bringing a gust of cold, damp air and the scent of cheap, floral perfume. She collapsed the umbrella and shook it out on the pristine marble floor. "Oh, Victoria, it's so good to see you," Jessica exclaimed. She leaned in for a hug. It felt stiff, performative, like hugging a mannequin. "Look, I brought you an orchid to brighten up the place. It feels a bit mausoleum-like in here, doesn't it?" "I like my mausoleum," Victoria said dryly, closing the door and locking it. The click of the lock felt final. "Hello to you too, Mark. And no, the house is not for sale. It's my home. It's where your father and I built our life." Of course, Jessica said quickly, shooting Mark a sharp, warning look. "We're not here to talk business, honey. We're here to take care of Mom." Jessica walked further into the hall, her eyes scanning everything. Victoria watched her closely. It wasn't a look of appreciation. It was an appraisal. Jessica wasn't looking at the history. She was looking at the price tags. She was calculating the value of the antique vase on the console table, the thread count of the Persian rug. "Where should we put our things?" Mark asked, breaking the tension. "The East Wing guest suite is prepared," Victoria said. 2 bedrooms. You'll have plenty of privacy." "Perfect," Jessica smiled. It was a smile that showed too many teeth and didn't reach her eyes. We're going to be so happy here, Victoria. I promise. I'm going to make sure you never have to worry about a thing. I'm a pharmacist, you know. I can organize all your vitamins and medicines. You won't have to lift a finger. Victoria felt a cold shiver that had nothing to do with the draft from the door. I manage my own medicines just fine. Thank you, Victoria said firmly. I may shake, but I can still read a label. For now, Jessica whispered. It was so quiet, Victoria almost missed it. She turned sharply. What did you say? I said. For now, let's just get settled, Jessica said loudly, her voice bright and cheery again. Oh, Mark, bring the bags upstairs. And be careful with the blue suitcase. That's got my supplies. As they began to walk up the grand staircase, their footsteps heavy on the wood, Victoria stayed below, watching them ascend. The tremor in her hand flared up, violent and sudden. She gripped the banister until her knuckles turned white. She looked at the front door. She had let them in. She had opened the gates. And for the first time in 40 years of living in this house, she felt unsafe. Outside, through the narrow window next to the door, she saw a shadow move near the perimeter fence. It was Baron, the neighbor's Doberman, patrolling the property line in the rain. The dog stopped and stared at the house, ears pricked, a low, guttural growl rumbling in his throat. Even the dog knew. The enemy was no longer at the gate. The enemy was inside. Victoria Sterling had always prided herself on her routine. For 40 years on the bench, routine was the dam that held back chaos. Wake up at 6 a.m., Earl Grey tea at 6:15, review legal journals at 7, medication at 8. But for the past 2 weeks, the routine felt slippery, like trying to hold onto a bar of wet soap. Victoria sat at the massive kitchen island. The granite countertop felt cold under her elbows. The morning sun was streaming through the bay windows, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. But inside Victoria's head, a heavy, gray fog was settling in. Her hand, the right one, was resting on a linen napkin, twitching rhythmically. Tap, tap, tap. It was the only sound in the room until the click of heels announced Jessica's arrival. Good morning, Victoria, Jessica chirped, bustling into the kitchen. She was wearing a crisp white blouse and holding a clipboard. She looked annoyingly energetic, too bright for a Tuesday morning. Sleep well? I think so, Victoria murmured. Had she? She remembered waking up 3 times, confused by the shadows in her own room. Or had that been a dream? The line between sleep and wakefulness was blurring. You look a little pale, Jessica said, her voice dropping to a professional. Clinical register, the voice she must have used with customers at her pharmacy counter. She walked over to the cabinet where Victoria kept her daily medications. It's a good thing I'm here. Mark said you missed a dose last week before we arrived. That's dangerous with your blood pressure. Jessica placed a small ceramic bowl in front of Victoria. Inside were 5 pills, 2 white, 1 yellow, and 2 small, oblong blue ones. Victoria frowned. She stared at the bowl. The fog in her brain cleared for a split second, sharpened by instinct. What are the blue ones? Victoria asked. Her voice was sharper than she intended. Jessica didn't flinch. She was pouring coffee, her back turned. Your doctor changed the prescription, remember? We talked about this on Tuesday. It's the new beta blocker for the tremors, to help you steady your hand. I don't remember talking to Dr. Evans about blue pills, Victoria said, picking one up. It had no markings, no numbers. Just a smooth, robin's egg blue surface. Jessica turned around, leaning against the counter with a patient, pitying smile. Oh, Victoria. See? This is what I mean. We went to the appointment together. You were complaining about the shaking affecting your writing. Dr. Evans prescribed these. It's a generic compound, mixed with your pressure meds. Trust me, I'm a pharmacist. I know what interactions to look out for. Victoria rolled the blue pill between her thumb and forefinger. She remembered the appointment. Yes, she remembered complaining about the tremor. But the rest was a blur. Had she agreed to this? Why couldn't she recall the conversation? I feel tired, Victoria admitted, hatefully exposing a weakness. Since I started these, my head feels heavy, like it's stuffed with cotton. That's just your body adjusting, Jessica said soothingly. She walked over and gently closed Victoria's hand over the pills. Her skin was cool, clammy. It takes a few weeks, but look at your hand right now. It's shaking less, isn't it? Victoria looked down. Her hand was indeed still. But it wasn't the stillness of calm. It was the stillness of a heavy weight, like her arm was made of lead. Mark worries so much, Jessica whispered, leaning in close. He says you're fading, Victoria. He cries about it. Don't prove him right. Take the medicine. Be the strong woman we know. Jessica turned to Mark, who was standing in the doorway, and spoke as if Victoria wasn't even in the room, a behavior reserved for toddlers and pets. See, babe? She just needs a firm hand, like training a puppy. If you let her ramble, she gets confused. But if you guide her, she complies. She turned back to Victoria, her voice sickeningly high-pitched. Isn't that right, sweetie? You're being such a good girl today. The manipulation was subtle, wrapped in concern. Don't be weak. Don't be a burden. Victoria looked at the pills. Then she looked at Jessica. For a moment, she thought about refusing. But if she refused, Jessica would tell Mark. Mark would look at her with those sad, disappointed eyes. And maybe she was forgetting things. Maybe she needed help. Victoria swallowed the pills with a gulp of lukewarm water. 20 minutes later, she tried to read the Wall Street Journal in the library. The letters began to swim. The sentences disconnected from each other. The headlines about the economy turned into meaningless black shapes. Her eyelids drooped. From the hallway, she heard Mark's voice, low and hushed. Found it yet? Not yet, Jessica's voice hissed back. The old bat hides things well. But with this dosage, she'll be malleable soon. We just need the code for the ledger. Victoria's eyes snapped open. The ledger. She tried to stand up, to confront them, but her legs felt like rubber. She slumped back into the leather armchair, the darkness pulling her down, 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 into a chemical sleep. Waking up was not a process. It was a collision. Victoria gasped, sitting bolt upright in her bed. Her heart was hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. The room was pitch black. The digital clock on the nightstand blinked. 3:14 a.m. But it wasn't the sound that had woken her. It was the smell. Rotten eggs. Sulfur. Mercaptan. Gas. Panic. Cold and sharp, pierced through the sedative haze. Victoria threw off the covers. Her legs were still wobbly from the blue pills, but adrenaline forced them to move. She grabbed her robe and stumbled into the hallway. The smell was stronger here. Thick. Cloying. Mark? She called out, her voice raspy. Jessica? Silence. The house was a tomb. She gripped the banister and navigated the stairs, counting them as she descended, a habit from childhood. 1, 2, 3. By the time she reached the ground floor, the smell was nauseating. There is nothing more terrifying than waking up to a silent house and a deadly smell. Victoria is fighting through a chemical fog, driven only by a survival instinct that refuses to fade. You have to ask yourself, in a house full of so-called caregivers, how does a gas stove just happen to be left on? Let's follow her into the kitchen, because every second counts right now. She rushed into the kitchen. There, in the darkness, she heard it. The terrifying hiss of death. She fumbled for the light switch. The harsh fluorescent lights flickered on. Victoria gasped. 2 of the burners on the industrial-sized gas range were turned fully open. No flame. Just gas, pouring into the kitchen for God knows how long. One spark, the refrigerator compressor kicking on. A light switch toggling, and the entire east wing would have been blown into orbit. Victoria lunged forward, twisting the knobs to the off position. Her hands shook violently, not just from the tremor, but from sheer terror. "Oh my God!" a voice screamed from the doorway. Victoria spun around. Jessica stood there in a silk nightgown, hands covering her mouth, eyes wide with horror. Mark was right behind her, looking disheveled and terrified. "Mom!" Mark yelled. "What are you doing?" I came down," Victoria stammered, the gas fumes making her dizzy. "I smelled it. It was on. I turned it off." "You turned it off?" Jessica stepped into the room, her voice trembling with accusation. "Victoria, I came down here at midnight to get water. The stove was off. You were the only one down here afterwards. I heard footsteps." "No." Victoria shook her head, the room spinning. "No, I've been asleep. I just woke up." "We heard you, Mom," Mark said, his voice breaking. He looked at the stove, then at his mother. "We heard you walking around. We thought you were just getting a snack." Jesus, Mom, you could have killed us all. I didn't turn it on, Victoria shouted. The judge's voice tried to emerge, but it sounded weak, defensive. I have a ritual, Mark. You know this. Every night before bed, I check the locks. I check the stove. I touch every knob. I checked it. Jessica walked over to the stove. She looked at Victoria with a mixture of fear and pity that made Victoria's stomach turn. Victoria, Jessica said softly, you didn't check it tonight. I saw you. You were wandering in the hallway around 1 a.m. You looked confused. You were talking to your husband. Edward? Victoria whispered. Edward is dead. I know, Jessica said, a tear sliding down her cheek. But you were talking to him. You came into the kitchen. I thought you were sleepwalking. I didn't want to startle you, so I went back to bed. I didn't know you touched the stove. Victoria backed away until her back hit the refrigerator. Cold. Real. Did she? Did she come down? The blue pills made her dreams so vivid. Sometimes she did dream of Edward. Could she have walked down here? Could she have twisted the knobs, thinking she was cooking dinner for a ghost? No, Victoria said, but it came out as a question. No? This is getting worse, Mark said, running a hand through his hair. First the lost phone, now this. Mom, I don't think it's safe for you to be alone anymore. Even with us here, I am not crazy, Victoria said, clutching her robe tight. She felt small. She felt 70 years old and fragile. Jessica put an arm around Mark, creating a united front. Two sane people staring at the madwoman. We need to lock the kitchen at night, Jessica suggested to Mark, ignoring Victoria. For her safety, we'll have to install a keypad lock on the door. Don't talk about me like I'm not here, Victoria snapped. Jessica turned to her, her face hardening just slightly. Then stop trying to kill us, Victoria. Go to bed. Victoria looked at her son. He wouldn't meet her eyes. He was looking at the stove, terrified. Defeated, Victoria turned and walked out of the kitchen. As she climbed the stairs, the doubt began to eat her alive. Did I do it? Is my mind rotting away? She didn't see Jessica standing in the kitchen doorway, watching her leave. She didn't see the slight, satisfied smirk on Jessica's face as she looked at the stove, a stove she had turned on herself exactly 10 minutes ago. Victoria reached her room and locked the door. She crawled into bed, shivering. She stared at her hands, the hands that had signed landmark judgments, the hands that had held her dying husband. Now, she couldn't trust them, and that was exactly what they wanted. Isolation is a predator's best friend. They have built a wall around Victoria, thinking no one can see inside. But criminals often forget that walls have two sides, and sometimes the most dangerous witness is the one you never bother to look at. Al Miller didn't believe in coincidences. You didn't survive 30 years in the Hartford Police Department believing in luck. You survived by noticing when the pattern changed. And the pattern at the Sterling estate had changed. Al sat on his porch, a lukewarm beer in his hand, his wheelchair angled towards the iron fence that separated his modest bungalow from Victoria's sprawling manor. Barron, his 90-pound Doberman, lay beside the wheels, ears twitching like radar dishes. What do you see, boy? Al muttered. Barron let out a low, rumbling growl. Across the fence, in the Sterling's driveway, a black SUV with tinted windows was idling. It wasn't a delivery truck. It wasn't a guest. It was trouble. Al adjusted his binoculars. He saw Mark, Victoria's son, standing by the driver's window. Mark was sweating, despite the chill in the air. He was arguing with the driver, a thick-necked man who didn't look like he worked for a bank. I need more time, Mark was saying. Al couldn't hear the words, but he could read the body language. The desperate hand gestures, the hunched shoulders. The driver reached out and grabbed Mark's collar, pulling him halfway into the window. Mark flailed. Barron barked sharply, sensing the aggression from 50 yards away. The driver shoved Mark back, pointed a finger at him, and the SUV peeled away, gravel spraying. Gambling debt, Al diagnosed instantly. Or drugs. Either way, the kid is desperate. Just then, the back door of the manor opened. Victoria stepped out into the garden. She looked frail. That was the only word for it. In all the years Al had lived here, Victoria Sterling had been a pillar of strength. She walked with her chin up, her steps precise. Today, she was shuffling. She was wearing a housecoat in the middle of the afternoon, clutching her arms as if freezing. "Victoria!" Al shouted, waving his hand. She didn't hear him. She was staring at a rosebush, her eyes vacant. "Hey, Judge!" Al yelled louder. This time, she turned. Her eyes struggled to focus on him. She took a few hesitant steps toward the fence. "Al?" she called out, her voice thin. "Is that you?" "It's me, Vic. You okay? You haven't been out in a week." Victoria reached the fence, gripping the cold iron bars for support. Her hand was shaking violently. I don't know, Al. I've been feeling unmoored." "The new medicine." "What medicine?" Al frowned. "You never took more than a vitamin in your life. Jessica says I need it." "For the tremor." Victoria looked around nervously, as if expecting to be scolded. "Al, did you see anyone here last night? In the kitchen?" "No, but I saw that SUV just now," Al said, lowering his voice. "Mark's got trouble, Victoria. Serious trouble. That guy looked like a loan shark." Victoria's eyes widened. The fog seemed to lift slightly. "A loan shark? You need to check your accounts, Vic. Don't trust that." The patio door slammed open. "Mom!" Jessica's voice cut through the air like a whip. She marched across the lawn, her heels sinking into the soft grass. She was smiling, but her eyes were cold, hard flints. "What are you doing out here without a coat?" Jessica scolded, reaching Victoria and draping a shawl over her shoulders. She pulled the shawl tight, almost like a restraint. "I was just talking to Al," Victoria said weakly. Jessica turned to Al. The smile vanished. She looked at his wheelchair, then at his scars, then at the menacing dog. She looked at him like he was trash that had blown onto her property. "Mr. Miller," she said icily, "please stop harassing my mother-in-law. She's in a very delicate state right now. The doctor said she needs peace, not whatever this is." "I'm just checking on a neighbor," Al growled. Barron stood up, hackles raised, staring directly at Jessica. "Well, check somewhere else," Jessica snapped. Victoria's confused. "She doesn't know who you are half the time. Do you, Mom?" She turned to Victoria, her voice softening to that manipulative coo. "You told me yesterday you were scared of the man with the mean dog, remember?" Victoria blinked. Did I? "Yes, you did. Come inside now. It's time for your afternoon pill." "I don't want the pill," Victoria whispered, looking at Al with a plea in her eyes. "Don't be difficult, Victoria," Jessica said, steering her away from the fence. "We're doing this for you." As they walked back to the house, Al saw Victoria look back over her shoulder one last time. It wasn't a look of confusion. It was the look of a prisoner being marched back to her cell. Al watched the door close. He patted Barron's head. "She's not crazy, boy," Al muttered, reaching for his phone. "But she's in a hell of a lot of danger. We need to keep a log. Starting now." He opened a notebook on his lap. Date: Oct 12. Subject: Mark in debt. Target: Victoria drugged. Status: hostage. And so, the trap is set. But what Mark and Jessica fail to realize is that pressure doesn't just crush things, it also creates diamonds. Victoria Sterling is about to face the darkest days of her life, but as the lights go out, her resolve is just beginning to shine. The isolation didn't happen all at once. It happened in degrees, like the temperature dropping as the sun went down. First, it was the glitches. Victoria sat in the library, the only room in the house that still felt like hers. She needed to call the bank. Al's words about the loan shark had been gnawing at her all afternoon, fighting through the chemical haze of the blue pills. "Check your accounts." She picked up the antique rotary phone on the desk, a heavy, brass instrument she had kept for decades. She lifted the receiver. Silence. No dial tone. Just a dead, hollow nothingness. She tapped the hook. Click, click, nothing. "Mark!" she called out, frustration rising in her throat. Mark appeared in the doorway a moment later, holding a wrench. He wouldn't look her in the eye. "Yeah? Mom? The phone is dead. I need to call the bank." "Oh." Mark rubbed the back of his neck. "Yeah, the storm last night. It knocked out the lines in the whole neighborhood. I called the company. They said it might take a week to fix." "A week?" Victoria narrowed her eyes. "In Connecticut? That's absurd. Let me use your cell phone." Mark hesitated. He shifted his weight from one foot to the other. I, uh, I left it in the car. Jessica has hers, but she's out running errands. Then where is my cell phone? Victoria demanded. I left it on the kitchen counter yesterday. Now it's gone. You lost it, Mom, Mark said, his voice pleading with her to just accept the lie. We looked everywhere. You probably dropped it in the garden or flushed it. Remember? You were confused yesterday. Gaslighting. The word floated up from Victoria's memory of legal briefs on psychological abuse cases. Deny reality until the victim breaks. I did not flush my phone, Mark, she said, her voice trembling with suppressed rage. I want to go to the bank. Drive me. Can't, Mark mumbled. Car's in the shop. Brake pads. My car. The Mercedes. Battery died. I have to get a new one. Victoria stared at him. Her son. The boy she had taught to ride a bike. The man she had bailed out of 3 failed startups. He was standing there, stripping away her connection to the world, brick by brick. You're lying, she said. It was a whisper, but it hit him like a slap. Mark flinched. Mom, stop. You're paranoid. It's the dementia talking. It's not dementia. Victoria slammed her hand on the desk. Pain shot up her arm, but she welcomed it. It made her feel alive. It's a cage. You are building a cage around me. It's for your own good, Mark shouted back, his face flushing red. You almost burned the house down. You wander around talking to ghosts. We are trying to protect you. He believed it. Or he had forced himself to believe it to sleep at night. That was the tragedy of Mark Sterling. He wasn't evil. He was weak. And weak men were the most dangerous kind, because they would do anything to avoid facing their own failures. I'm going to my room, Victoria said, standing up with as much dignity as she could muster. Dinner is at 6, Mark said sullenly. Jessica is making soup. I'm not hungry. Victoria walked past him. She didn't go to her room. She went to the front door. She grabbed the handle and twisted. Locked. She tried the deadbolt. It wouldn't turn. It was a double-cylinder lock, one that required a key from the inside. A key that used to hang on the hook by the coat rack. The hook was empty. Victoria leaned her forehead against the cold wood of the door. She closed her eyes. No phone, no car, no internet, no key. She wasn't a patient. She wasn't a mother being cared for. She was a hostage in a $2 million prison. It is a terrifying realization when the sanctuary of your own home turns into a cage, isn't it? Victoria is finally seeing the full, painful picture of this betrayal, but knowing the truth is only the first step. You have to wonder, how can one woman fight back when even the locks on the doors are against her? Let's find out. But as the fear washed over her, something else sparked in the darkness of her mind. A tiny ember of the old Victoria Sterling. The Victoria who had put mob bosses behind bars. They think I'm broken, she thought, opening her eyes. They think the blue pills have won. She looked down at her shaking hand. She made a fist. It still shook, but the fist was tight. Let them think it. Let them think they've won. Because a prisoner has one advantage over the jailer. The jailer eventually stops watching the lock. Victoria turned away from the door and headed for the stairs. She needed to vomit. She needed to purge the blue pills from her system. And then, she needed to find the ledger before they did. The war began at breakfast. It wasn't fought with guns or gavels, but with a piece of toast and a napkin. Victoria sat at the kitchen island, watching Jessica dispense the morning ritual. Click, rattle, drop. 2 white pills. 1 yellow, 2 blue. Here you go, Mom, Jessica said, sliding the ceramic bowl across the granite. Her smile was tight, impatient. She was dressed in a sharp business suit, though she had nowhere to go. She was the warden of this prison, dressed for a board meeting. Victoria looked at the blue pills, the chemical shackles. For the last 24 hours, since she realized the doors were locked, a cold, hard rage had been crystallizing in her gut. Rage was good. Rage burned off the fog. Thank you, dear, Victoria said. Her voice wavered perfectly. She allowed her hand to spasm violently as she reached for the bowl, knocking a spoon to the floor. Oh, for heaven's sake, Jessica sighed, bending down to pick it up. In that split second, while Jessica's eyes were on the floor, Victoria moved with a speed that defied her 70 years. She swept the 2 blue pills into the palm of her left hand and shoved them deep into the pocket of her housecoat. In the same motion, she grabbed the glass of water. When Jessica stood up, Victoria was swallowing hard, grimacing as she downed the water. She opened her mouth to show it was empty, a trick she had learned from watching drug addicts try to fool the bailiffs in her courtroom decades ago. "Good girl," Jessica said, patting her head. "See? That wasn't so hard." Victoria smiled a vacuous, empty smile. "I just want to rest today," she mumbled. "You do that," Jessica said, checking her watch. "Mark and I have paperwork to sort out in the study." Victoria shuffled back to her room. She locked the door, went into the ensuite bathroom, and flushed the blue pills down the toilet. Watching them swirl away gave her the first sense of satisfaction she'd had in months. By noon, the withdrawal hit. It wasn't pleasant. Her hands shook so badly she couldn't hold a book. Her heart raced, skipping beats. Sweat soaked through her blouse. Her body was screaming for the sedative it had grown dependent on. But beneath the physical misery, the mind was waking up. The gray cotton that had stuffed her skull for weeks began to dissolve. Memories sharpened. Logic returned. The judge was back in session. She lay on her bed, feigning sleep, but her ears were straining. The house, usually so silent, was full of noises she had been too drugged to notice before. Footsteps pacing in the hallway, the reap of packing tape, and voices, angry, hushed voices drifting up from the library downstairs. Victoria waited until the clock struck 2 p.m., the nap time Jessica enforced. She got up, ignoring the dizziness, and took off her shoes. She moved in her stocking feet, silent as a ghost on the plush carpet. She crept to the top of the landing and looked down into the foyer. The library door was ajar. She descended the stairs, hugging the wall to avoid the creaky step on the 7th riser, a quirk of the house only she knew. Inside the library, the scene was chaotic. Books were pulled off shelves. Drawers were yanked open, their contents spilled onto the Persian rug. It looked like a burglary in progress. Jessica was standing on a stepladder, running her hands behind the large oil painting of Victoria's late husband, Edward. "It has to be here, Mark," Jessica hissed. "She's old school. She doesn't trust the cloud. She keeps the hard copies." Mark was sitting on the floor, surrounded by financial statements, his head in his hands. "We've looked everywhere, Jess. Maybe there is no ledger. Maybe the trust is managed by the bank." "The bank needs the access code, you idiot," Jessica snapped, climbing down. "The bank accounts are offshore, Mark, anonymous. The only record of the account numbers is handwritten in that book. Without the ledger, the money doesn't exist. She told me once, years ago, when she was drunk at Christmas, that she kept the cipher key inside." Victoria, hiding in the shadows of the hallway, felt a chill. She remembered that Christmas. She hadn't been drunk. She had been grieving. She had trusted her new daughter-in-law with a confidence. "Never trust anyone who didn't earn it," Edward used to say. "Vinny gave me until Friday." Mark's voice was shaky, pathetic. "After that, they start breaking bones." "Stop whining," Jessica's voice cut in, ice cold. "We get the conservatorship tomorrow. Once I have power of attorney, I'll drill every box in that bank. But tonight we squeeze her. She's weak. One more accident might just scare the code out of her." "How?" Mark asked. "She's weak, Mark. The pills are scrambling her brain. Tonight, we turn up the heat. Maybe another accident. Maybe she gets confused and tells us everything just to make it stop." Victoria pressed a hand over her mouth to stifle a gasp. They weren't just waiting for her to die. They were accelerating the process. She backed away, step by silent step. She retreated to her room, locking the door with trembling hands. She went to the window and looked out. The sky was gray, promising a storm. She looked at her reflection in the glass. An old woman, a victim. No, she thought. Not a victim, a witness. The fog was gone. The verdict was in. They were guilty. Now, she just had to prove it before they killed her. The best way to catch a liar is to let them think they have successfully deceived you. Victoria spent the rest of the afternoon preparing. Her hands still shook from the withdrawal, but she used that. She amplified it. If they wanted a helpless, senile old woman, she would give them a performance worthy of an Academy Award. She needed a weapon. Not a knife or a gun. She couldn't overpower Mark, let alone the younger, vicious Jessica. She needed information. She went to her closet and knelt down, pushing aside boxes of old shoes. In the far back corner, Hidden inside a hollowed-out volume of Blackstone's Commentaries on the Laws of England was a small, velvet pouch. She opened it. Inside was a silver fountain pen. It wasn't just a pen. It was a gift from Edward when he was working as a district attorney, a covert dictaphone disguised as a Mont Blanc writing instrument. For when the defendants think they're off the record, he had joked. She opened the battery compartment. Empty. Of course. Victoria's hands trembled as she pulled open the drawer of her nightstand where she kept her old hearing aid kit, one she rarely used. She fumbled with the pack, popping out a tiny, silver button cell battery. With painstaking precision, she slid it into the slender barrel of the pen. She pressed the tiny button on the clip. A minuscule red light blinked once. It was alive. Thank God. Victoria slipped the pen into the deep pocket of her cardigan. At 6 p.m., she unlocked her door and shuffled downstairs. She messed up her hair, let her mouth hang slightly open, and dragged her left foot as if she had suffered a minor stroke. Mark and Jessica were in the kitchen. The tension in the room was thick enough to choke on. When Victoria entered, they jumped. "Mom?" Mark said, guilt flashing across his face. "You're up. Edward?" Victoria mumbled, looking past Mark at the refrigerator. "Is it time for the opera?" Jessica exchanged a look with Mark, a look of triumph. "The pills are working." "No, Victoria," Jessica said, using that sickeningly sweet tone. "Edward isn't here. It's dinner time. Sit down. I made soup." Victoria sat. She stared at the soup. I had a dream," she stammered, letting her hand shake so much the spoon rattled against the bowl. "About the numbers." The room went dead silent. Jessica froze, the ladle halfway to her mouth. "What numbers, Mom?" Mark asked, his voice trembling with hope. "The blue book," Victoria whispered, eyes unfocused. Edward said, "The numbers are safe." "In the blue book." Jessica put down the ladle. She walked around the table and knelt beside Victoria. "Yes, the blue book. Where is the blue book, Victoria? Did Edward tell you where he put it?" Victoria looked at her, blinking slowly. He said, "Cold. It's in the cold." "The freezer?" Mark guessed. "No, idiot," Jessica hissed at him. Then back to Victoria. "Where, honey? Where is the cold?" The winter coats," Victoria mumbled, then closed her eyes as if exhausted by the effort. "The cedar closet. In the attic." It was a lie. The ledger was actually taped behind the backboard of the antique vanity in her bedroom, but the cedar closet was in the attic, the furthest point from her bedroom. "Okay." Jessica stood up, her eyes gleaming with greed. "Okay. Mark, finish your soup, then go check the attic." "Now?" "Yes, now." She's lucid for a second. "Go." Mark scrambled up and ran out of the kitchen. Victoria slumped in her chair, watching Jessica pace. To the untrained eye, Victoria looked defeated. But inside her mind, the gavel had already banged. She wasn't just observing a greedy daughter-in-law. She was analyzing a suspect. "Greed makes them sloppy," Victoria thought, her internal voice cold and precise. She didn't ask for the key to the attic. She didn't ask about the lock type. She just ran. "Greed bypasses logic. That is how I will hang them. I need water," Victoria croaked. "Get it yourself," Jessica muttered, dropping the facade now that Mark was gone. She was staring at the ceiling, listening to Mark's footsteps overhead. Victoria stood up. She walked to the counter, but she didn't get water. She moved toward the small seating area by the bay window where Mark and Jessica usually sat to drink their evening wine and conspire. She pulled the silver pen from her pocket. With a sleight of hand she hadn't used since she caught a cheating boyfriend in college, she slipped the pen into the dense foliage of the potted fern on the side table. The microphone end pointed directly at the love seat. She shuffled back to the table just as Mark came thundering down the stairs, covered in dust. "Nothing," Mark panted. "I checked every coat. Nothing." "You didn't look hard enough," Jessica shrieked. "She said the blue book." "Maybe she's just rambling, Jess. She thinks I'm her dead husband." "She knows." Jessica walked over to Victoria, grabbing her chin and forcing her to look up. The cruelty in her eyes was naked now. "You know, don't you, you old hag? Where is it?" Victoria whimpered, shrinking back. "Edward. She's hurting me." "Stop it, Jess." Mark pulled his wife away. "Don't touch her. If she has bruises, the judge will see it tomorrow. Jessica shook him off, breathing hard. She smoothed her hair, composing herself. Fine. Tomorrow. We get the conservatorship tomorrow. Once I have power of attorney, I'll tear this house apart brick by brick until I find it. And then? She looked at Victoria with pure malice. Then we put her in the cheapest state facility we can find and let her rot. Mark looked at his mother, then at the floor. He didn't argue. He didn't defend her. His silence was his signature on her death warrant. Let's go to the living room, Jessica said, grabbing a bottle of wine. I need a drink. I can't look at her face anymore. They moved to the seating area. Victoria watched them sit down on the love seat, right next to the fern. I'm going to bed, Victoria whispered. Go. Jessica waved a hand dismissively. And don't wander tonight. I locked the kitchen. Victoria walked to the stairs. She climbed slowly, heavily, but once she was out of sight, on the landing, she stopped. She didn't go to her room. She sat on the top step, hidden in the shadows. She couldn't hear them from here. But she didn't need to. The silver pen in the fern was listening. It was recording the clink of glasses. It was recording the plan to sell the house. It was recording the admission of the changed medication. It was recording the conspiracy to defraud the court. Victoria sat in the dark, hugging her knees. She was terrified. She was exhausted. But for the first time in 3 months, she wasn't helpless. She was the Honorable Victoria Sterling, and she had just opened the first file of the prosecution. It breaks a mother's heart to hear her own child plot against her, but that pain has now hardened into cold resolve. Victoria finally has the evidence she needs, but with time running out and eyes watching her every move, getting that recording out of the house seems impossible. Or is it? Midnight. The witching hour. The house was silent, save for the rhythmic snoring of Mark drifting down from the guest wing. They had celebrated prematurely. They had drunk 2 bottles of expensive Cabernet, toasting to their future wealth. Victoria stood in the shadows of the living room. Her heart pounded against her ribs, but her hands were steady. She wasn't shaking anymore. Adrenaline was a powerful drug. She moved toward the fern. The silver tip of the Mont Blanc pen glinted in the moonlight like a beacon. She reached out. Her fingers brushed the cold metal. Thirsty, Victoria? The voice came from the darkness behind her. Low, amused, cruel. Victoria froze. She didn't turn around. She didn't have time. She snatched the pen and shoved it into the waistband of her pajama pants, pulling her robe tight around it. Then she turned. Jessica was sitting in the high-backed armchair in the corner, nursing a glass of wine. She hadn't gone to bed. She had been waiting. I wanted water, Victoria stammered, reverting to her act. Cut the crap, Jessica said, standing up. She walked into the moonlight. Her face was flushed with wine and malice. I saw you. I saw you put something in the plant before dinner, and I just saw you take it back. Jessica took a step closer. What was it? Jewelry? A key? Give it to me. It's nothing, Victoria said, backing away toward the French doors that led to the garden. Just a trinket. Give it to me, you old witch. Jessica lunged. She was younger, faster, and fueled by greed. She grabbed Victoria's arm, twisting it hard. Victoria cried out, pain shooting through her shoulder. Mark! Jessica screamed, but not for help. She was setting the stage. Mark! Help! She's attacking me! Let go! Victoria gasped, struggling. Not until I see what you're hiding. Jessica ripped the robe open. The silver pen fell from Victoria's waistband and skittered across the hardwood floor. Jessica's eyes widened. She recognized it. A dictaphone? You were recording us? She looked at Victoria, and for the first time, she saw the truth. The eyes weren't vacant. The posture wasn't slumped. Victoria Sterling was standing tall, looking at her with the cold judgment of a Supreme Court justice. It's over, Jessica, Victoria said, her voice steel. I have everything on tape. The drugs, the threats, the fraud. Jessica stared at the pen. Then she smiled. A terrifying, unhinged smile. Who's going to hear it? Jessica whispered. She kicked the pen under the sofa. Then, without hesitation, she grabbed a heavy crystal vase from the table and smashed it against the wall. Crash. Mark, call 911! Jessica screamed, tearing at her own blouse, scratching her own neck until it bled. She's got a knife. She's crazy. Thundering footsteps on the stairs. Mark burst into the room, bleary-eyed. What happened? She attacked me, Jessica sobbed, pointing a shaking finger at Victoria. She's hallucinating. She thinks I'm a demon. Look what she did to me. Mark looked at his wife's bleeding neck, then at his mother standing by the broken glass. Mom? Mark whispered, horrified. She's lying, Mark, Victoria said calmly. The pen, under the sofa. Listen to it. She's raving, Jessica shrieked. Get her away from me. Call the police before she kills us both. Mark looked at Victoria. He saw the strength in her eyes, and it terrified him. He didn't want the truth. He wanted the easy way out. He pulled out his phone and dialed 911. No, Victoria whispered. The betrayal broke something inside her. Sirens wailed in the distance. They were coming. Victoria looked at the sofa. She couldn't get the pen. Jessica was blocking the way. She looked at the French doors. Outside, in the rain, a shadow was pacing the fence. Baron. Victoria grabbed a heavy brass paperweight from the console table. Stay back, she yelled, brandishing it. Jessica flinched. Victoria used the moment to smash the glass pane of the French door. Shatter. Wind and rain roared into the room. She's escaping, Jessica yelled. Victoria didn't run. She dropped to her knees, reached under the sofa, and scrambled for the pen. Her fingers grazed it. She grabbed it. Jessica tackled her from behind. Give it to me. They wrestled on the floor, amidst the broken glass. Victoria was losing. She was 70 years old. Her strength was fading. With a final, desperate heave, Victoria threw the silver pen through the broken window, out into the stormy night. Baron, she screamed, her voice cracking with desperation. Fetch. She didn't throw it far, she couldn't. Her shoulder was weak. The pen tumbled through the rain, barely clearing the patio stones and landing in the mud near the fence line. It wasn't a perfect throw. It was a dying wish. For a second, nothing happened. Jessica laughed, a cruel, jagged sound. Stupid old hag. The dog isn't. A dark shape exploded over the low iron railing. Baron didn't just leap. He hunted. He had been trained for weeks by Al to retrieve specific silver objects for treats. He snapped the pen up from the mud before Jessica could even take a step. No! Jessica scrambled up, running to the window. But the dog was gone, vanishing into the darkness with the silver prize in his mouth. Police lights flashed in the driveway. Officers burst through the front door, guns drawn. Drop the weapon! They yelled at Victoria, who was holding nothing but air. Jessica collapsed into Mark's arms, sobbing theatrically. She tried to kill me. Oh God, she tried to kill me. As the officers handcuffed Victoria's wrists that had once signed landmark rulings, she didn't struggle. She looked out the broken window. The yard was empty. Please, Al, she prayed as they dragged her away. Please be watching. A desperate Hail Mary pass in the pouring rain. It is a moment that leaves you holding your breath. Victoria has done her part, gambling her entire life on faith and a loyal dog. But will it be enough to save her from the darkness of a cell? The answer lies in the courtroom, and you won't want to miss what happens next. She had practiced that throw. Every day for the last week, when they thought she was napping, she had thrown a spoon, a comb, anything heavy enough, aiming for that exact patch of grass where Al let Baron patrol. It was a Hail Mary pass, and her life depended on a retired cop knowing the difference between a stick and evidence. There is no clock in the psychiatric holding cell, just white walls, white floor, and a metal cot bolted to the concrete. Victoria sat on the edge of the cot. They had taken her clothes. She was wearing paper scrubs that smelled of chemicals. They had taken her dignity. She was now patient 704, 72 hours. That was the mandatory hold for a danger to self and others. For 3 days, she sat. She refused the medication they tried to give her. She drank only water from the tap. She ate the bread, leaving the suspicious stew. Mrs. Sterling? A young nurse stood at the door. Your family is here. They brought you clean clothes for the hearing. Victoria looked up. My family is the reason I am here. They're very worried about you, the nurse said, unlocking the door. Your daughter-in-law brought this dress. She said you'd want to look nice for the judge. Victoria took the dress. It was navy blue, conservative. It was the dress she had worn to Edward's funeral. A psychological jab from Jessica. You are dead. Victoria changed in silence. She caught her reflection in the polished metal mirror. Her hair was messy. Her face was gaunt. The tremor in her hand was back, fueled by stress and lack of sleep. She looked exactly like what they claimed she was. A broken, senile old woman. "Time to go," the guard said, as they walked her down the hallway, handcuffed and shackled. A terrifying thought gripped her. What if Baron buried the pen? What if Al thought it was just a stick? What if the rain destroyed the electronics? She was walking into a courtroom without a lawyer, without evidence, facing a son who had sold her out and a daughter-in-law who was a sociopath. She stepped into the transport van. The doors slammed shut. Darkness engulfed her again. "I am Victoria Sterling," she repeated the mantra. "I am the law. I am the law." But in the dark, the words felt hollow. Bam! The courtroom doors banged against the wall. "Objection!" the young lawyer yelled. Victoria slumped in her chair, staring at the trio in the doorway. The lawyer, the neighbor in the wheelchair, and the Doberman. "What is the meaning of this?" Judge Thorne barked, banging his gavel. "Mr. Miller, you cannot bring a dog into my courtroom." "He's not a dog, Your Honor," Al wheezed, rolling his wheelchair forward. "He's the courier of evidence." Jessica stood up, her face white as a sheet. "Your Honor, this man is the neighbor who has been harassing us. He's senile too." "Sit down, Mrs. Sterling," Judge Thorne ordered. He looked at the young lawyer James Bennett, a junior associate Victoria had mentored years ago. "Mr. 44, Bennett, you have 30 seconds to explain before I hold you in contempt." "Your Honor," James said, breathless, placing the chewed-up leather briefcase on the table. He opened it and pulled out a plastic bag. Inside was the silver Mont Blanc pen. It was muddy and had teeth marks on the casing, but the red light was blinking. "This," James said, holding it up, "is a dictaphone belonging to Justice Victoria Sterling. It was retrieved from her garden 3 days ago by Mr. Miller, shortly after the police removed her." "It's fake!" Jessica screamed, losing her composure. "She planted it." "If it pleases the court," James ignored her. He pulled a small, portable Bluetooth speaker from his briefcase and held the pen's microphone up to it. "I would like to play a recording from the night of October 15th, the night of the alleged assault." "I object," Jessica's lawyer shouted. "This is inadmissible. Hearsay, unverified chain of custody." Judge Thorne looked at Victoria. He saw the tears in her eyes. He saw the desperate hope. "Overruled," Thorne said softly. "Play it." James pressed the button. Static filled the room. Then, voices, clear as a bell. "If we don't find it by Friday, Vinny's guys are going to break my legs." Mark's voice. "We will find it. Or we will make her tell us. Tonight, we turn up the heat. Maybe another accident." Jessica's voice. The courtroom gasped. Mark put his head in his hands. The recording continued. "Once I have power of attorney, we put her in the cheapest state facility we can find and let her rot." Jessica froze. She looked around the room. Every pair of eyes was staring at her with disgust. James fast-forwarded. "Give it to me, you old witch." The sound of a struggle. The sound of glass breaking. "Mark, call 911. She's attacking me." Jessica's voice, changing instantly from vicious to victim. James stopped the recording. Silence. Absolute, heavy silence. James stopped the recording. Silence. Absolute, heavy silence. Judge Thorne lowered his glasses. He didn't look at the lawyers. He looked directly at Mark, then at Jessica. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried the weight of 40 years on the bench. "I have seen murderers in this courtroom, Mrs. Sterling. I have seen thieves, but I have rarely seen a soul as hollow as yours." Thorne turned his gaze to Mark. "And you sat there and let them convince this court that the woman who taught you to walk was losing her mind, while you were the one losing your humanity. The law calls this conspiracy. I call it a tragedy." It's AI," Jessica stammered, grasping at straws. "She faked it. Technology can do anything now." "Mark," Victoria spoke for the first time. She didn't look at the judge. She looked at her son. "Tell the truth." Mark looked at his mother. He looked at his wife, whose face was twisted in a snarl of desperation. He looked at the handcuffs on his mother's wrists. "Mark, don't you dare," Jessica hissed. "It's true," Mark whispered, then louder. "It's true. It's all true. We changed her meds. We gaslit her. We wanted the money." "You idiot!" Jessica lunged at Mark, clawing at his face. "Bailiffs!" Judge Thorne roared. Two officers tackled Jessica, pinning her to the ground as she screamed obscenities. "Victoria Sterling," Judge Thorne said, his voice trembling with emotion. "The petition for conservatorship is denied with prejudice. The court orders the immediate release of the defendant, and I am issuing an immediate arrest warrant for Jessica and Mark Sterling. There is truly nothing more satisfying than watching the truth finally silence the lies." Victoria endured the humiliation for this exact moment of vindication. But don't go just yet. The judge has one final, powerful lesson left to teach her son, and it involves a single, tarnished penny. An officer came over and unlocked Victoria's handcuffs. The metal clicked open. Victoria rubbed her wrists. She stood up. She walked over to Al and Baron. She rested her hand on the dog's head. "Good boy," she whispered. She didn't look back at her son as they read him his rights. The verdict had been delivered. As the squad car pulled away, Victoria felt a hand on her shoulder. It was Judge Thorne. He had stepped down from the bench and walked over to the railing. "I'm sorry, Victoria," Henry said, his eyes wet. "I almost let them convince me." Victoria straightened her jacket. She looked at her old friend with forgiveness, but also with firmness. "The law is blind, Henry," she said softly. "But justice sometimes needs a dog to lead the way. The storm has finally passed. The lies have been washed away, and the truth stands tall. But there is one question left unanswered, one final mystery that started this entire war. What was actually inside the blue ledger? Let's join Victoria one last time to find out. 2 weeks later, the Sterling Manor was quiet again. But this time, it wasn't a lonely silence. It was a peaceful one. Victoria sat in the library. The blue ledger was on the desk in front of her. She had retrieved it from behind the vanity where it had been safe all along. Opposite her sat James Bennett, her young lawyer. "So," James said, eyeing the book. "This is it? The $2 million? Victoria smiled. She opened the ledger. The pages were blank. James frowned. "I don't understand." "There is no trust fund, James," Victoria said, pouring tea. Her hand still trembled slightly, but she poured it herself. "The trust fund is real, James, but I moved it into a blind, irrevocable trust 3 months ago. The day Mark asked to move in, they could have torn the house apart. They never would have touched a dime. The blue ledger was just a decoy to keep them busy while I built my case." But, Jessica thought what she wanted to think. Greed makes people blind. I told her a story about a blue ledger years ago to test her character. She failed. Victoria closed the book. "What about Mark?" James asked gently. "He's facing 5 years. Jessica is facing 10. He called me yesterday from jail." Victoria looked out the window. "He asked for bail money. And I told him that I am finally doing what a good mother should have done 20 years ago." "What's that?" "Letting him face the consequences of his actions." Victoria picked up a small velvet pouch from the desk. She slid it across to James. "This is for Mark. Give it to him when he gets out." James opened the pouch. Inside was a single, tarnished 1,920 wheat penny. "A penny? Edward's lucky penny," Victoria said, her face unreadable. "When Mark was 6, he swallowed a penny and was terrified he would die. Edward held him all night, telling him it would pass. Mark has always needed someone to hold him while he waits for his mistakes to pass." She snapped the pouch shut. The sound was final. "Tell him nobody is holding him this time. The penny is all that remains of the Sterling fortune. The house goes on the market tomorrow. The proceeds will be donated to the Connecticut Elder Abuse Prevention Fund. I am closing the docket, James." "And you?" James asked. "Where will you go? Florida?" Victoria smiled. "Al has a sister in Key West. He says the humidity is good for the joints. We're driving down next week. Me, Al, and Baron." She stood up and walked to the window. Outside, Al was throwing a frisbee for Baron. The dog leaped into the air, free and happy. $2 million. That was the prize Mark and Jessica destroyed their family for. But in the end, the legendary blue ledger was empty. The only inheritance Mark received was a tarnished 1,920 wheat penny, a reminder that true value isn't found in what you steal, but in who you are. Judge Victoria didn't just save her life. She reclaimed her dignity. She proved that while eyes may age, wisdom only gets sharper. What would you have done in Victoria's place? Do you believe justice was truly served with that single penny? Let us know in the comments below. And if you believe that wisdom is the ultimate superpower, please hit the subscribe button and share this story with a friend who needs to hear it. Stay sharp, stay safe, and see you in the next story.